Welcome to the deep dive. You sent us a stack of sources that are all centered on this genuinely powerful and really counterintuitive idea.
Mm-hmm.
The argument that the path to stable, predictable, and ultimately competent politics, what the source calls boring politics, is actually shockingly radical.
It's an analysis that, it completely flips how we usually think about political change, right?
Totally.
When you hear radical, you think of extremes, maybe chaos. But this deep dive suggests that to get stability, to finally stop governing by constant drama, you have to demand such fundamental change that it is radical.
That sets our mission perfectly then. We need to unpack why the source believes our current political system is, well, essentially designed to fail most citizens.
Right.
Why stability is treated like some kind of exotic continental delicacy, as they put it, and what the 6 specific massive steps are that the source says could lead us toward a duller, more functional democracy.
And we have to start with that core finding, the real aha moment.
Yeah.
The source isn't saying the system is broken. To say it's broken implies it, stopped working as it was meant to.
Right. It suggests it was good once.
Exactly. Instead, the argument is that the system is working perfectly as designed. It's designed to work for a very specific, very narrow group of powerful people.
So it's not incompetence, it's the incentive structure. Let's unpack that. Segment 1, the design flaw. The source details decades of policy shaped by this toxic cocktail of factors.
Crippling inequality, privatization, chronic underinvestment.
And crucially, things like donor capture and what they call democratic distortions. What kind of state does the system end up in when you mix all that together?
It ends up in what the source calls permanent crisis mode.
Permanent crisis mode.
And what's really fascinating here is the claim that this isn't an accident. This constant sense of crisis is functional. It's profitable for the established elite. Well, crisis keeps the news cycle turning. It justifies emergency spending. And most importantly, it keeps the donations flowing. When the sky is always falling, you have to donate to the people promising to hold it up.
So all the political energy gets systematically funneled into short-term firefighting.
Yeah.
The government it can't afford to think beyond the next election cycle.
Or the next media panic.
Or the next big donor dinner where all the real deals are made.
Exactly. The pressure to win the next 24-hour news cycle means any kind of long-term planning, anything quiet or preventative, it just gets dismissed immediately.
And the policy consequences of that are, well, they're stark. The source gives some pretty painful examples.
Oh, yeah. Think of collapsing social care systems, education budgets that are just continually slashed.
And the chronic underinvestment in everything from, public transport to water systems.
It makes the cost of short-termism feel incredibly real. You look at a bridge that needed routine maintenance 20 years ago, but since that was boring, it was ignored.
And now we're facing a multi-billion-dollar emergency rebuild that requires, of course, massive political drama.
That is the core mechanism the source is analyzing, the kind of politics that would actually fix these issues. The quiet, preventative, boring kind is just structurally ignored.
There's a really powerful line in the sources that says, sensible forward planning doesn't sell newspapers.
Right, and just as importantly, repairing things before they break doesn't win elections.
That's a deep structural disincentive. If you quietly prevent a crisis, you don't get to stand on a stage and claim victory for a dramatic rescue.
It creates this perverse environment where problems almost have to be allowed to get worse
in order to generate the political capital you need for a big dramatic fix later on.
Exactly. And to tie this back to what the source calls democratic distortions, it argues that donor capture ensures that while the problems affect everybody, the solutions, especially the emergency ones, are often tailored to benefit the people funding the political machine.
Not the general public.
Not the general public. So this whole cycle guarantees the system serves the few because the many are locked out of any calm, long-term planning process.
That really shifts the whole perspective on what political competence even is. It's not broken, it's running on a different set of metrics than citizen well-being. But if politics is addicted to this perpetual crisis, who is actually asking for the antidote? That moves us into segment 2.
Yeah.
The appeal of the damp spreadsheet.
Well, it turns out the people who actually thrive on predictability are demanding it.
Like who?
Business leaders, serious economists, major investors, They hate chaos. They despise instability. They have to plan for the long term, and they can't do that if regulations and tax laws are just swinging wildly with every election.
Their message is clear then. It's stop swinging wildly between ideological extremes.
And just give us something predictable.
Yes, and the source explicitly links this boring politics to genuine national success.
It does. It states that boring, competent politics is how countries become sustainably wealthy. It's how you prevent crises decades in advance, how you attract investment consistently.
And how you rebuild public trust in institutions.
Slowly, painstakingly, you rebuild that trust. Predictability is the true currency of a successful state.
So stability isn't just a side benefit, it's the fundamental engine.
Yeah.
But then you hit this incredible paradox. If business leaders and citizens need this, why is the political system so intent on being dramatic?
Well, that's the utility and the Achilles heel of the boring. As you mentioned, the source says competent, dull governance has all the political sex appeal of a damp spreadsheet.
That is such a powerful metaphor,
Yeah.
and I think it perfectly captures why these discussions are so hard to sell to the public. It's not loud or angry or shocking. It's invisible to the media and the political machine.
And that's the real friction point. If stability is so vital for investment, why haven't the powerful business lobbies just mandated boring competence?
Right.
The source argues you just can't get boring politics from a political class that is fundamentally addicted to donor money, media theatrics, and perpetual instability.
And they also point to the constant selling off of public assets. Privatization.
Yes. You can't have stability when the political class keeps monetizing public services for a short-term revenue spike, only to wonder why everything costs more and works worse in the long run.
It's the ultimate short-term fix that creates long-term damage, and it's funded by the very donor money the system relies on. So the incentives have to be reset, fundamentally.
You can't ask a political class that depends on crisis to suddenly become a long-term planner without, addressing that root cause.
And that's why the source concludes that polite tinkering around the edges, say minor changes to transparency rules, it's doomed to fail.
Because those polite reforms leave the structural incentives for crisis completely untouched.
Which brings us right to the core of the whole argument in segment 3, the radical road to boring. So if small, polite reforms are useless, what does the source mean by being radical?
Well, it clarifies that radicalism here is not about, lighting torches or some cartoonish revolution.
Right.
It's defined by the Latin root, radix, which means root. Radicalism is just looking calmly at the evidence of decades of systemic failure, and concluding that small nudges and business as usual will not work.
Because the majority of citizens are, as the source says, structurally locked out of the decisions that shape their lives.
Exactly.
So it's a radical acceptance of the scale of the fix that's needed. The damage is so widespread that it demands massive structural steps, not just some cosmetic adjustments. So let's get into those specific demands. What's the first major step to re-engineer politics toward this?
Yeah.
Dull competence.
Step 1, a new approach to ownership. And this is radical because it challenges the assumption that public resources, essential services, should be treated solely as profit generators for private companies.
So what does that look like?
It could mean things like community health funds, changing corporate governance so it prioritizes long-term stability over short-term returns, or having public stakes in essential infrastructure.
So it removes the incentive to extract the maximum profit in the short term, which is what causes the instability.
Precisely. It creates a stable, long-term stakeholder whose only interest is continuous function, not dramatic profit spikes.
Which brings us directly to step 2, which attacks the financial levers of power. Strict limits on political money.
This is maybe the most necessary and, because of that, the most radical step. The source argues if you don't limit the money, you haven't changed a thing.
It just shifts the power, right? Away from the small donor class that profits from crisis and back toward the actual electorate.
Exactly. Without that donor addiction, politicians are forced to focus on long-term, stable policies that benefit everyone simply because that's what wins the majority of votes.
So it's the essential prerequisite for all the other steps. As long as the current funding system exists, the political class is incentivized to maintain the crisis mode that lets them raise money.
You got it. And if we look at steps 3 and 4, they're about returning to that foundational, boring investment. Step 3 is serious, long-term reinvestment in education and skills.
Not just training people for today's market, but building a foundation for future stability.
And step 4, rebuilding shared infrastructure. And this isn't just about repairing roads. This is about committing to long-term national planning for energy, transport, critical services.
Where maintenance is mandatory, not optional.
Right. These are classically boring policies that require courage because the payoff might not show up for 2 political cycles.
That is the trade-off.
Yeah.
You're demanding a political class that acts courageously now, knowing the reward is future stability, not some immediate election victory drama. Then we have step 5, reversing the democratic distortions caused by inequality. This tackles the inherent unfairness that ensures policy benefits flow upward. What does that mean in practical terms?
It means structural changes. Could be in electoral systems, could be in local governance, things that ensure decision-making power is genuinely distributed.
So that citizens, not just wealthy lobbyists, can influence policy.
Exactly. If the majority is structurally locked out, the policies will always reflect the needs of the minority. Reversing that is radical because it asks the powerful to willingly share control.
And finally, step 6 is creating that stable, boring political environment that businesses and citizens desperately need. This is the outcome, the goal.
Yes, it's the goal state, but it's only achievable if you execute on the first 5 radical changes. You can't just negotiate your way to boring competence. You have to dismantle the systems that profit from chaos.
So the ultimate hurdle isn't that this is complex. It's just self-interest. Why are these obvious fixes? Better education? Functional infrastructure? Less corruption? Why are they considered radical instead of just common sense?
It comes back to that perfect line in the sources. Turkeys don't vote for Christmas.
Right.
Political parties addicted to the current money pipeline will not willingly vote to dismantle the source of their power. That's why citizens have to demand it. The system is designed to resist its own improvement.
But hold on, if radical change is required to get to boring politics, aren't we just risking more chaos in the short term? Does the source address that transitional risk?
It implies that the existing chaos, the permanent crisis mode, is the real risk. Polite reforms are just prolonging the crisis. The transition might require some short-term political friction, sure, but the price of not changing is far, far higher in the long run.
So radicalism in this context is actually a pragmatic survival strategy, not an ideological luxury.
That's a great way to put it.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? The source is arguing for a truly functional democracy, where money no longer dictates outcomes, where national decisions can't be bought, and where the future is planned with courage and spreadsheet competence.
Instead of fear and manufactured drama. And when we synthesize it all, that first essential step is just so pointed. Limiting political donations is not described as some minor technocratic tinkering.
Yeah.
It is the first essential step toward achieving the dull, dependable, grown-up politics the country desperately needs. It resets the gravitational center of power from the donor dinner back to the public good.
So if boring stability is the goal and limiting political donations is the first essential step, what second step could also be considered radical, just because it removes a politician's ability to run on drama? Maybe something like implementing mandatory long-term national planning for all critical infrastructure, regardless of the election cycle. Something for you to mull over as you think about what kind of systemic change you want to demand.